What is going on, YouTube? It is your boy, Faithful to God. And we are up early on this July 4th to discuss We Woke Now and his deceptive tactics. This is The Good Doctor's Bad Medicine. And I am joined by Abu Kamer, the infamous Abu Kamer, aka the Richard Katz exposer.
Good morning and happy 4th of July to everyone from New York and to everyone beyond.
Indeed, indeed. With that being said, I do want to I just want to just say shout out to everyone who's watching us right now. I know it's very early in the morning. I know a lot of the people who are watching us are probably overseas at the moment. And for those who are going to listen to this later in the day, uh, definitely salute to you. So, anyways, Abu, before we kick things off, can you kind of give people a little bit of a idea of what we're going to be discussing today, so this way they get a general idea of what's what all the topics are going to be.
Oh, well, as I understand it, for the most part, we're going to be discussing some recent posts by Kelly Richardson. However, I just noticed right before we went on, he went live a couple of hours ago. And so we won't be addressing that into too much detail because I haven't looked at that yet. But we're going to look at some of his recent stuff, and in particular, his recent controversy with an account run by a gentleman called Issachar. And some of his, and by that his, I mean Kelly's perplexing replies to Issachar and perplexing and at times familiar responses to that controversy. You know, although as I understand it, you also want to address Dante first this morning. Yes, because and by the way, happy 4th of July to Dante and Kelly. You know, our good friends, the good doctor, and also to Dante. Happy 4th of July to those gentlemen.
Well, if I could say some kind things about our friend Kelly, his videos have a very nostalgic quality to them, right? They kind of feel like a Windows Reader, whenever you watch the older videos.
That is a charming quality about his voice.
Charming quality, that's right. That's right.
Quite
Just wanted
endearing.
to say that. But since I mentioned Kelly Richardson and since you mentioned Dante, here's something interesting that's going to be a bit of a little preface to what we're going to be discussing today, because it's going to have at least some relevancy to our discussion. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and pull up the clip. So could you give a little bit of background before I play this clip? Could you let everyone know what this was about and more or less what we are going to watch?
Well, if I'm not mistaken, you're going to play the
Berean.
Yes, Berean. Yes, because Berean had showed some of his discussions with Dante behind the scenes. And so I think this is interesting. First of all, because it's if I'm not mistaken, that what you're going to show is strictly relevant to the pews. It's Dante's understanding of the Katz controversy behind the scenes, because in public his position has been somewhat commendable. He said he would say if Brown lied, then or if Brown made up a scholar, then he should come clean and admit that. But if he didn't, then this is on the UA. He would sort of take this neutral position, and on the surface it's respectable enough. But it turns out that apparently behind closed doors, Dante was convinced that the whole Katz thing was a fabrication. And if so, you have some clips of Berean showing his what Dante had told him in a bit more of a private setting, apparently, right?
Yes, so I'm about to play it momentarily.
Looking forward to seeing this.
Yeah. So we back and forth and we talking and all of this stuff. So this is the Dante thing right here. Let me not get thrown off. This is me and him talking. Let me see if I scroll it. All right, this is Dante now, and he banged on me the other day when I was in the group. He told him don't block me, but I'm just doing this because Dante and the Israelites want to destroy me. I thought the UA was gonna bring.
By the way, can you hear that?
It went out a second ago. It's right after he said UA. He said, I thought the UA, and then it cut.
Okay. So let me just make sure. I want to make sure that the audience can hear it. So you can hear everything that was being said, correct?
I can hear it, but I'm on my microphone. I mean my headphones, so I don't know if I'm
okay.
If the show is, because I have the show muted.
Gotcha. Here we go.
Let me not get thrown off. This is me and him talking. Let me see if I scroll it. All right, this is Dante now, and he banged on me the other day when I was in the group. He told him don't block me, but I'm just doing this because Dante and the Israelites want to destroy me. I thought the UA was going to bring that DNA smoke. Now they MIA. I shut their whole narrative down. Abu catching Brown and Kelly was amateur hour, catching them. I want y'all to watch these words. We gonna talk today. Oh, we gonna talk today. I feel like talking. I'll be destroyed, so I might as well talk. Because they say I'm a hater and they want to destroy me. What's the other funny dude? I ain't even talking about their dudes. All right, Abu catching Brown and Kelly was amateur hour compared to me. Y'all know he on his high horse. He amped his own self. I'm a destroy Marie, and he's a legend in his own mind, but he don't know any better. Teo and Sister E having the whole UA too shook to jump on your show again about the DNA. Sister Cherry Salam was supposed to get on here. The sister supposed to get on here. G Consciousness got on here. He showed, I don't know what he done showed. He limber something. I don't know what happened. Dante admitted that he don't even know that much, and we'll get down because I got Alton in here too and all of that. I ain't going to show everything, but he's talking about Alton and debate. Y'all seen the debate, but this is just kind of the behind-the-scenes thing. You could say what you want in the midst of him rolling, in the midst of him being on that, on his giving out them Christmas gifts. He turns around and wild out. He turns around and he wild out. He tried to act like the Israelites try to act like what Abu and Faithful and them did was not major. That was major. Because these dudes done turned around and invented a scholar. So he's very offended. They turn around and everything is in an uproar. They was on the side talking, and I'm telling y'all before I even slide up on the scrolls, they don't know, rush, don't laugh. They on the side talking. Everybody nervous. Abu done wild out. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna choke them. Oh, Abu came to shut it down. They in a frenzy over there. I'm gonna show y'all why I'm gonna show a proof today. This is me and him talking. I'm gonna scroll down. Let me go back up here. I don't want to pull everything out right now. Let me see. All right, this is all Dante. Let me make this big for y'all so y'all can see. I think I can make this thing bigger here. Let me make this whole thing right here so we can see this. So ain't no confusion. All right, he hit me. Just for your information, I sent this to Teo and Sister E. Let me see if I can blow this up right here. I'm trying to see. Y'all know I ain't let me see, maybe that can do it. All right, look at this. This is Sister E and them, Team Israel. He giving me screenshots of what they saying. This is he doing the same thing I'm doing. This is for dialogue. We're gonna force this thing. We gonna, like he said, you're gonna force the church, and he gonna force everybody to look. Israel, we gonna force them. All right, Berean looking for y'all. This is him talking to Sister E and them. Now, because they're mad, because it's a cover-up. This is the Israelite cover-up. Listen, Kelly and Major both need to fall on their swords. This is Dante talking to Sister E and Teo Ministries. And he sent me the screenshot. I'm live. I'm like, yo, and I'm at work wilding out, blowing shots. I'm like, yo, y'all better produce that, Professor. I'm amping myself up. I'm amping myself. Yo, y'all got to produce this, Professor. I got a problem. Kelly and Major both need to fall on their swords. I know Kelly wants to protect his cousin, but he's going to drag people down with him. Shots fired, Dante. But he's talking privately. But publicly he said, yo, if he did wrong, whatever. And if we're being honest, we know Major was moving shady prior to this. Kelly called me several times and said as much before this all went down. I'm just letting y'all know that I'm not riding with Kelly or Majors on this. Bigger things are at stake than those Negroes' pride. If they fall, they just fall. That's the great Dante. He's going to destroy me now, but what am I going to do? Y'all protect me. Y'all pray my strength in the Lord.
That was interesting. That was quite interesting. That makes me realize that something for a future show, right. Something we've never discussed, something we never revealed, and we won't. Go ahead.
No, continue. But I just wanted to show the relevant screenshot that Berean showed on his screen. So can you see this?
Yes, I can. Yes, I can.
All right. So if you could just read that, I'll just scroll as you read.
It might be easier for you to read it because I'm looking for my phone.
Okay, I got you. So it says, Kelly and Majors both need to fall on their swords. Now, this is Dante speaking. I know Kelly wants to protect his cousin, but he's going to drag people down with him. And if we're being honest, we know Majors was moving shady prior to this. So Dante is saying that he believes Majors. This is William Brown, right? The guy
Hmm.
who pretended to be Richard Katz. He says he believed that he was moving shady prior to the incident with Richard Katz, where the Katz fiasco was the top was blown off the lid or whatever the case is, and it was exposed for what it was. Kelly called me several times and said as much before this all went down. I'm just letting y'all know that I'm not riding with Kelly or Majors on this. Bigger things are at stake than those, that word pride.
Those guys, their pride. Yeah.
If they fall, they just fall. So here, interestingly enough, Dante wasn't even aboard with them on the whole Richard Katz fiasco, even though it seemed like later on they all tried to band together to try to do a lot of spin doctoring and cleanup. But interestingly, when it first went down, this was the reaction that Dante Fortson had. Isn't that
Hmm.
interesting? This is
If I
behind the scenes.
if I recall correctly, so the whole thing kicked off in December. I believe this message was from January, if I'm not mistaken. And what's interesting is I don't have the screenshots now, but the way I recalled it when this first came out was that came on the heels of something which was unrelated. So Dante Fortson, I think he was showing like a screenshot on Facebook of his analytics or for his website, like his website was doing well, and he tagged a bunch of people in it. And one of the people he tagged was Damon Richardson, right? So Damon Richardson left a comment on the post saying something to send a number of things like, I'm not worried about you. I'm not worried about this. And, take a look at the new book that just came out. It's doing well. And then he said something to the effect is like, how's that petition of yours going? And then he slipped in at the end. He goes, you aren't embarrassed for your friends Kelly and Brown after they pulled that move with Richard Katz, the Richard Katz fiasco. He slipped that in there, right, Dana? And it was right on the heels of that. If I recall correctly, the dates were such that it was practically on the heels of that Dante was privately messaging these people saying, man, they got to fall on their sword because of the Katz thing.
Indeed.
But there's something I want to say. It's not something we prepared for this discussion, but I don't know if you remember this. I meant to discuss this with you in private, but this is something we might discuss in a future show. You remember when the lead up to the show, when we were going to drop the information on Katz, I had, after we had received a response from Brown, right? From Katz, quote unquote, I wrote to Kelly, I left a comment because he had commented on one of your videos. And I started asking him questions like, hey, what institution does Katz work at again? And, and he didn't answer any of that. But what happened was, it was like 2 days before the video was going to drop. Kelly set his video, the one that had the cat stuff, he set it to private. And we were going back and forth in WhatsApp saying, oh man, he set it to private. I wonder if he's aware that something's going to hit. Maybe he spoke to Brown. Then he put it back up. He took it off of private. But I still have our discussion from, on WhatsApp about that. And maybe in a future show, we'll discuss that because it was interesting. He did that. He briefly set it to private. And he also put up an obscure community post about, how some of our people, we went into captivity because of the things that we did, and some of our people are still doing that with their desire to deceive people just for the sake of being right. We should just admit that we're wrong. It was very cryptic, and it was right around the same time, and I was like, I wonder where he's going with this. But we know where it actually went, but I wonder if those were signs of like some private reflection on Kelly's part as well, thinking that this was all a mistake. But who knows? We'll discuss that in a future show. We don't have the slides ready for that. Of course. But I just thought of that now, seeing what Dante said at the end.
Yeah, absolutely.
About Kelly saying behind the scenes that Majors is shady.
So with that being said, this is a beautiful segue to go right into the core of what we're going to be discussing today. So I wanted to give a little bit of background for those who may be unfamiliar, those who are new subscribers. So back in December, William Brown and Kelly Richardson of We Woke Now, for several months, they were engaging us on the issue of the Georgia pews in First African Baptist Church in Savannah, Georgia. And this eventually led to them misrepresenting a scholar in David Bunis in November, which we had already exposed. And then they created a scholar named Richard Katz. This was William Brown pretending to be a Tel Aviv-based professor by the name of Richard Katz. This was shown to be false. They were exposed on that. It was quite embarrassing for their side. So the clip that we just showed was essentially highlighting the reactions from people on their end of the fence, right? People like Dante Fortson and their thoughts on the matter, showing that they weren't even in agreement with what was going on with William Brown Kelly Richardson and their approach and how they handled everything, especially with the deception, which I imagine Dante Fortson and others were not in on.
Yes, yes, yeah. But
Yes.
in Dante's defense, he was definitely not in on that. That's clear.
Right. And now, what's interesting is that you have a gentleman recently by the name of Issachar who produced a video where he was playing some of your clips from around that time frame, showing how the arguments for the pews from their end have been terrible, just horrible arguments from the very onset. When Benaiah Israel proposed a reading that read left to right, you know, um, for a take a grasp of Yah Israel with a bass voice. In fact, that wasn't even the original reading. The Israel portion was introduced later when they misrepresented Bunus's own words, and then so it was originally take a grasp with a bass voice or something like that, right? And then the Israel seemed to be introduced later. So, with that being said, let's go ahead and show something. So,
yeah, to be clear though, the Issachar didn't, just so nobody's confused, he didn't get into the cats controversy. And this is relevant. Kelly's upset. He thinks that Issachar has been so outrageous with him, but Issachar for the most part has been very much a gentleman, especially on the issue of the pews. He's and this isn't we'll get into this as we go along, but he respectfully invited people, amongst other things. But back on June 10th, he had a long show on June 10th in which he asked people to consider some of my videos on the pews. And he in no way was he endorsing me as a person or my ideological background or anything like that. He made that very clear. He was saying just focus on the arguments, don't focus on who's putting the argument forth, right? And that's like standard argumentation. And it was interesting because Kelly became quite apoplectic about that.
Right. And by the way, just a bit ironic that we have the gentleman Issachar on the right hand side holding up a cat.
Left hand side. Lest anyone gets.
Yeah, the left hand side, and then on the right hand side we have the good doctor.
Yes.
The quote unquote good doctor.
Let's be fair here. The secular world asks us to respect people's preferred pronouns, and maybe we're not ready to go there yet, but at the very least, we can respect people's preferred titles. So I'm going to call him Dr. Kelly. The man calls himself doctor, so I'm calling him doctor.
All right. So, basically, so what erupted last month was essentially the back and forth over the Georgia pews
well, I wouldn't even call it a back and forth. It was Issachar asking them to just look at the arguments, and Kelly looking at anything but the argument. He avoided the pews, and it's, as we'll discuss tonight. That's this morning. It was very familiar. It was very familiar to us. Some of his tactics.
And relevant to this is also the fact that while these two gentlemen are ideologically on opposite ends of the spectrum regarding the pews, Issachar nevertheless self-identifies as an Israelite. Kelly Richardson self-identifies as an Israelite. And yet here you have an example of Kelly Richardson attacking somebody from his own, I guess what he would call his own cultural paradigm on a minute detail. And as we're going to see throughout the conversation, throughout the live stream, Kelly Richardson didn't have the kindest words for Issachar. Right, despite the fact that Issachar was a gentleman, and I have to admit, I saw the video where Issachar was going through the I guess the argument for the pew, and then showing your videos, and he was very respectful. At no point in time was he being disparaging towards Kelly Richardson. Now, the same cannot be said for Kelly Richardson in his response to Issachar.
And there is something to be said about that. We should just focus on arguments and try to be, we don't have to have these sort of outbursts and stuff like that. And we'll discuss this as we go along, because there's other people that we can bring in as examples of how to conduct a disagreement, in an agreeable manner.
Indeed. So with that being said, I believe it would be most salient for you to, if you could just again, give, just for the people who are tuning in right now, can you give them an abridged idea of what happened before we go into the clips that we're about to play?
Okay, so the situation is, as we said, back on June 10th, Issachar did a show where he covered a number of subjects, but it was a show that was over 2 hours long, and he devoted almost an hour to discussing the pews. And part of it was he showed my analysis of Benaiah's first attempt to transcribe what's on the pews, and then he segued into some of my more recent videos, which get into how the available evidence, because now there's people who tell us the church always knew that it was Hebrew on the pews, and of course there's a lot of questions about that, like how come none of them have been able to translate it, if they've been able to retain this knowledge of it being Hebrew all the way through, but they didn't retain the, an ability to point to the precise markings. But whatever the case, when he showed videos that I recently did where we get into how when you look at the some of the available evidence, the news articles discussing the pews, and as well as a couple of people who were familiar with the church in the 80s and the 70s, what you find is that the evidence seems to point to the idea of Hebrew on the pews being a very recent idea. In the 70s and the 80s, they were calling it something else, but whatever the case. Anyway, so Kelly got upset about that, but he didn't want to discuss the pews. He's discussed all kinds of other things, and most recently, he's tried to pretend like it has nothing to do with the pews at all. But we're going to show here, this clip we're going to show, it's from a show that Kelly did. It's his response 11 days later. When he opens up mentioning the Issachar controversy, the very first thing he mentions is Issachar talking about the pews. And then we're going to do a jump cut because throughout the show, it's over 2 hours long. Kelly never discusses the pews, even though he opened up by mentioning that's what one of the primary thing he's upset about. And then we do a jump cut to him openly admitting that he has no intention of discussing the pews. Yeah, so go ahead.
Many of you guys are aware of the stirring of the pot, so to speak, of Issachar, just out of the clear blue, want to stir up things about the discussion about the pews out of the clear blue. You guys already know how ugly that thing had gotten. The spirit of witchcraft that many of those guys were bringing to the table. So I just completely turned the corner from that stuff. Got some things still working to mitigate some things from a legal aspect, but I turned away from that stuff because it was not fruitful discussion. It was a lot of stirring up, a lot of things that was going on that was just we just have to call it what it is: demonic and witchcraft. And I'm not even going to get into the discussions, the things that you said about the pews. I'm not bringing that back on the table. I'm not putting my pearls out there before the swine. So I'm making that clear.
Okay, all right. If you could pause that there before it jumps to the next clip. Okay, so what's interesting about that, there's a lot to unpack there, right? First, there's the absurdity of him, accusing our approach to the pews of being witchcraft. And funny enough, he accused Issachar of, engaging in witchcraft. And this has been that's one of the things I wanted to touch on when we discussed that. I'm guessing you agree with me here that there's a familiar feel to his response to Issachar as it reflects his responses to us. Issachar tried to get him to, well, not necessarily him, but tried to get people to look at the arguments about the pews. And so Kelly later on flailed his arms and accused Issachar of witchcraft. He did the same thing with us. He spent nearly a year not looking at the pews, not looking at the arguments, but he would get into things like accusing us of witchcraft. And before I go on, is there anything you want to chime in with? Or?
No.
All right.
Yeah.
So, but then the other thing that stood out there, so just to recap, that was what we showed. That's Kelly responding to Issachar. He opens up at about the 3-minute mark, talking about how Issachar had the audacity to touch on, to try to resurrect discussion on the pews. And then throughout the show, he never discusses it. But around later on in the show, as we do that jump cut, he says he's not going to discuss the pews. The pews are off the table. And he says that he's not going to cast his pearls before swine, meaning it's as if to imply that Kelly has great arguments in favor of. Oh, by the way, just to be clear, Issachar is skeptical of the claim that Hebrew appears on the pews. That's just to be clear as to what Issachar's position is. And so Kelly, for him to say, I'm not going to cast my pearls before swine, it's to imply that he has some sort of great argument. He could show us some stuff that would bowl, it would bowl Issachar over and convince everybody, but he's not going to go public with that because he's not going to cast his pearls before swine. And that is familiar as well. If we could, I actually left a comment on Kelly's video on that video. It didn't make it past moderation, so nobody else saw it, but we can show it. Do you have that? It's that second image?
Yes.
Yes. Could you read it? Because I'm having trouble seeing it on my phone.
Yes.
So this is just to set this up. This was a comment I left on Kelly's video, on the very video we showed.
So it says, "Greetings, Kelly. I hope you're doing well. As always, I realize that this comment not make it past moderation, but at the very least, you'll see it." In the smiley face. All right. I must confess, the portion at 1 hour and 55, the 1 hour 55-second mark, in which you make it, in which you make clear that you intend to not discuss the pews, really stood out to me. Let me actually do it this way because it'll be easier if I just make it a little. Stood out to me. You yourself alluded to how one of the central issues in this controversy is Issachar raising discussion on the pews. It was practically the first objection you raised, circa the 3 minute and 11-second mark. Yet you have no intention of engaging the specific pew related arguments he asked people to focus on. I must admit, I find that curious. Also, in the above mentioned portion, when you declare your unwillingness to discuss the pews, you say you won't cast your pearls before swine. For me, that was reminiscent of last November when Brown said Bunis confirmed an entire Hebrew sentence on a pew, and Brown even gave an English translation of that alleged sentence. I asked in a comment on the video for the precise Hebrew sentence, and you replied that no one would meet my request. Then, too, you likened it to quote unquote casting pearls before swine. But honestly, did you even have a Hebrew sentence to withhold? Or was there no such sentence? With all due respect, the quote unquote the quote unquote pearls before swine statement makes an odd fit in situations when the quote unquote pearl in question doesn't exist. On that note, be well, smiley face.
Yes, yes, and we hope the good doctor is doing well. We wish him no ill will, and like as I said earlier, I hope he's having a wonderful 4th of July. But so that, as I said, that was a comment that I put on his video. He does not let my comments get past moderation, so I'm thankful that you allow my comments on his videos to get past moderation and show them. But yeah, so what I was alluding to there in that second paragraph, or that last paragraph, was the fact that back in November they came out with their appeal to Bunis. And, they've quietly dropped this. They've quietly moved away from this. But back in November, they claimed that that a scholar, David Bunis, had confirmed an entire sentence on one of the pews. But the funny thing is they never showed the sentence, but they did give an English translation of that alleged sentence, right? And that always stood out for me. I was like, that's awkward that you won't show the Hebrew sentence, but you give the translation. So I had commented on the video back then in November, asking them for that sentence. And that's when Kelly came out and talked about how offended he is and how he's not going to cast his pearls before swine. That's his excuse for not giving me the sentence. He's not going to cast his pearls before swine, But really, I think we all know they had no such sentence. And we're going to play a clip. Yes. So what we're about to play here is, if this is from your video, had a title roughly along the lines of, it was addressing hasty Hebrew Israelite boastings about the Georgia pews. This is from December 1st, but it's recounting the controversy over Bunis from late November. All right, so go ahead. And this will show what we're talking about. Significant was a panel discussion hosted on the Boom Church Atlanta account on November 22nd. And although it was over 2 hours long, the panelists never got around to sharing a precise Hebrew sentence, but they did nonetheless, they made a claim that they had found a coherent sentence. And while they didn't actually share that precise sentence, they offered an alleged translation of that sentence. And they even claimed that a scholar had backed it. So here, take a look at the relevant portion from that panel discussion. And this comes towards the end of the discussion. And note carefully how the host, Pastor Majors, shares the alleged translation, declares that the challenge to find a coherent Hebrew sentence has been met, and even claims that he has scholarly backing for that sentence.
So not only does it say take a grasp of God, but it said take a grasp of Yah or God, Israel, with a bass voice, as you put it, or with a loud voice, meaning praise him loudly. That's what this means. So Abu asked, can we find a coherent sentence? Well, yeah, we just did. And not only that, we got a scholar to back it.
I figured, at the time, I figured I should ask the people over at the Boom Church Atlanta account to provide the Hebrew text that was allegedly behind the translation they offered. So I went over to their video from November 25th, which provides a 17-minute excerpt from their panel discussion that took place 3 days earlier. As this excerpt focused on the portion which gave the translation, I left a comment asking if they could provide, the precise string of Hebrew characters, the precise Hebrew phrase behind that translation. I received a reply from Kelly Richardson in which he declared that I owed him and his family an apology. And while he expressed how offended he was, he likewise never got around to sharing the Hebrew sentence which is allegedly behind the translation he had so enthusiastically embraced. So I respectfully commented that, I do not recall ever disrespecting Pastor Kelly Richardson. And I asked him to point out, the alleged disrespect which he had in mind. And then towards the end of my reply to him, I reiterated my request that they should share the relevant Hebrew sentence they've been boasting about. Kelly Richardson replied again, this time declaring, quote, "I'm not going to share a single thing with you," end quote. And then, more angrily, seemingly, and as it's in all caps, he declared, "You will get no assistance from me nor anyone in this group," end quote. Okay, all right. If we could pause that there, before we jump to the third clip. So I actually have we have a screenshot. I think you have it. It was a screenshot that I took the day that he posted that comment, so we could look a little more closely at that. This third image, so we could take a closer look at that, because I think it's relevant here, just so we can get into this whole thing about, and only briefly, and then we'll jump to another subject, but about the patterns that we see here. And I see it's coming up. Yes. Okay. So this is the comment that he sent to me. So just again, one more, just very quickly before we jump on to the next, what was going on was they were claiming that they got a scholar to confirm an entire Hebrew sentence. They even gave a translation of that sentence. But of course, they couldn't show the sentence appearing on the pew, and they wouldn't even tell people what the precise Hebrew sentence was. When I asked them just for the string of characters, so I could compare it to, what we have on the pews, that's when he wrote this comment to me, where he says, I'm not going to share a single thing with you. I will not cast my pearls before swine. The reason why we went down this road is because his responses to Issachar are very familiar, because they parallel his responses to us, where when he would talk about not casting his pearls before swine, it was a bluff. And I'm sorry if he finds that offensive, but this was absolutely a bluff. He did not have a sentence to give, so he wasn't withholding his pearls. He didn't have that quote unquote pearl. I'm sorry, but go ahead.
Indeed, no pearls whatsoever. Yes, absolutely.
Do you
But
go ahead.
yeah, no. But I think the more salient thing here is the fact of the matter is that he employs this tactic seemingly as a defense mechanism to try to avoid having to furnish any sort of evidence, because he has no evidence. If he had any evidence, he wouldn't be pulling this little bluff that he does. I'm not going to cast my pearls before swine. No one's going to assist you. If he actually had a sentence to furnish, do you think? You don't think he would be showing us? You don't think he would be plastering it throughout all his videos?
Yeah, no, exactly. That's one of the great ironies. Like, he makes all kinds of claims. He claims that they found Amharic on the pews, and to such an extent that they can identify the language, and they found all this stuff on the pews. Yet for example, they claim that cats found a pew that says B'nai Yisrael, but for some reason, the only thing they show is his, irregular and ahistorical spelling of Israel with a Zion and 5 yods and no aleph. It begs the question: why do you keep putting that out if you have all these other gems in your in your back pocket? You have what Richard Katz found, you have what the entire sentence that Boone has found, you have Ge'ez script that's so complex that you can even identify it as specifically Amharic rather than some other language that uses the Ge'ez script. It's like,
Right.
why not show all of this? And so his answer is, because I'm not casting my pearls before swine. But I think, especially within the case of that sentence that Boone has found,
It's very familiar patterns, right? Very familiar.
Oh yeah.
You know.
Yeah. If we could
In
segue.
fact,
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, no. Yes, I was gonna say, interesting that you mentioned that, familiar patterns, because another familiar pattern is him threatening litigation against people, threatening to sue people.
Yeah. Did you catch that in the clip? I know it passed really fast, but in that first clip, when he was talking about Issachar and the pews, he said basically, "Oh, we closed the door on that, but I still have some legal stuff that I got to take care of. There's still some legal matters." That was interesting, because that reminded me of something we haven't really discussed, which was that
In fact,
Kelly.
if
Go
I
ahead.
can I replay that part in the
Yeah. So
video?
that's
So
the
in
first
case,
clip. Yeah. Go ahead.
yeah. So if it's in the very, let me do that real quick. Let me go to about the 41-second mark.
Yes.
Give me a second. Let me just get there. All right, give me 1 second. All right. All right, give me a second. I'm just trying to jump to the relevant part. And yeah, ooh, I have it right here. Yep. Gonna go back a little bit more, just a little bit. All right, there we go. All right. And I'm gonna play the clip right now. Here we go. If you could talk to so the audience
Yeah, I'm here. I
can.
was just waiting for this clip to go up. So it's funny because I was just looking at Michelle's comment. She said he's going to sue y'all and lose y'all, but sue y'all and lose. But real quick, it goes beyond that because we'll play it here. He's going to mention his little legal troubles, I mean his legal actions that he's going to take, and then we'll jump into how deep his claims go. Go ahead.
Some things still working to mitigate some things from a legal aspect.
Yeah, that's fine. So he said that really quick in passing. He's still got some stuff he's got to take care of from a legal aspect, and that reminded me. I'm so glad you jumped back into that.
Still working to mitigate some things from a legal aspect, but I
yeah, that's good enough.
That stuff because
that's good.
It's not fruitful discussion.
So as I was saying, so he said that in passing in his response to Issachar about how he's pretty much done with the pews, but he's still got something he's got to take care of, in terms of legal matters, which is fun. That's interesting, and it reminded me of something that we haven't discussed on air. I've mentioned it briefly in a community post. I think it was my very first community post, but we haven't really discussed it in like a show, and it's the fact that back in December. Tell me if you recall this, if you remember this. That back in December, he was talking about bringing federal and international legal charges. So it's not just him suing us, because he's been threatening to sue us since October of 2019. But in December of 2020, right before the cat stuff dropped, he was talking about how we had bullied Professor Bunis. This is what he claimed, and that we had engaged in harassment against him and Bunis and all these people, and that we broke federal laws, and we also broke. He says we also broke laws that have to deal with international law, and he promised that he was going to bring charges against us. So if you can, let's play that clip of him.
By the way, I think this is a funny comment. He is the feds. Well, didn't he say he was a government agent?
Yes.
Didn't Kelly say he was a government agent?
Yeah, that when all these attempts to flag our videos, he said that it's not him doing it; it's the government, right, because he's an agent with top secret security.
By the way, just to be on record, Abu, have you received any letters in the mail? How's that litigation going?
Yeah, no, so nothing yet. Well, that's what I'd like. Nothing
yet.
I've
never received anything through the mail. So where's this alleged litigation?
Yeah, let's play this clip of the promises he made. And this is back in December of 2020.
Yes. All right. So interesting point, though. Interesting point, right? Yes, interesting point. I thought that was fascinating, that was caught by someone in the audience, that Kelly Richardson claimed to be a government agent, man.
Mm-hmm. Oh, by the way, somebody asked if we're live. It was 93, and good morning to 93. Well, this is definitely live, sir. And good morning. Happy 4th of July to you and everyone else in the chat. No, it's not this clip. It's not this clip. It's a different video. It's that third clip we'll get to in a moment, but
yes, my apologies.
No worries. I know, but this is going to be fun.
How you know this is live, y'all?
Yeah, but it's fine. I'm sure everyone's cool. So yeah, we're about to show. Right, yeah, we're going to show some clips of Kelly from last December, and December 16th. The date is going to be relevant.
Just even, and we could go through the email that they sent to Professor Bunis again and show you their tactics and see what these guys don't have a clue about. Number one, Professor Bunis is overseas. And when you send those type of emails and you start phishing and those type of things, you start getting into international crimes. It's not just local, it's international. Yeah. And many of you guys are hiding behind what you think is dummy accounts. It's traceable.
Oh, yes.
You may think that you created a dummy account. I can tell you all about computer forensics. I'm not new to this thing. So you can go to the library, right? and open, call yourself sending an email from that library, or you may try to, get other computers to kind of hop from, and you could go through the dark web. Let me tell you right now, it's all traceable.
Yep.
So every email that was sent to Professor Bunis, guess what?
It's traceable.
There's an IP address that's associated with the computer that it was sent from.
Even,
There's a location
Yep.
that it was sent from. All of that stuff is attainable. So
Yep.
I'm making it clear right now. You're not going to get away with it.
Yep.
That's not a threat. This is a promise. You are not going to get away with it.
Yep.
And last thing I want to say, Sister E, these guys have no clue of the depth of what they really are getting into.
Yep.
When you get into phishing, that's what it's called, phishing. It is a crime to harass people. That is a crime. To bully people, that is a crime. And when you do it across state lines, let's just say if you are in Chicago, let's say if you are in Arizona, let's say I'm mentioning those places for a reason. Let's say if you are in Florida and I am located here in Virginia. Guess what? When you call yourself bullying someone, guess what? You are getting into federal territory. Why? Because you are crossing state lines. And then when you do this on someone that's overseas, now you're getting into international crimes.
Yep.
That is criminal. But that's what they do. They hide behind these channels, and that's what they do all their stuff, thinking that it's going to stay hidden. But they messing with the wrong people. They mess with the wrong ones, because what they think that they're getting away with, like bullying Professor David Bunis, guess what? They're not going to get away with it. And that's not a threat. That is a promise.
Yep.
They are not going to get away with it. And again, they don't understand law. When you're bullying someone and they're overseas, that is international waters. That is an international incident. Technically, that is an international incident.
Yep.
Then even within the state, when you go across state lines with your foolishness and throwing slander on, you can get into what? Federal law. Federal crimes. Because when you go from one state to another state, now you're entering into what? The federal level.
Yep.
So when they hear us saying things like, hey, they don't understand the legal aspects of it, and they try to pump their chest and say, oh, well, we just doing this, and no, it's beyond that. Why? Because we see more than what they can ever imagine for us seeing things.
Oh man. Yeah. You anything you want to say on that before I give my comment?
Because I know how their minds work. A lot of folks who tend to endorse them. I wanted to say, number one, since it was brought up, not that it's necessarily well, it is somewhat salient. No one bullied David Bunis. In fact, if anyone wants, they can check out my YouTube channel, the Faithful to God YouTube channel. They can check out the video, Hebrew Israelites false flagging, if that's the name of the video, if I'm not mistaken. And in the video, there's actually the email correspondence that you had with David Bunis, right? Where you continue to have cordial correspondence with him after the fact. This is after the incident that took place.
Long after they raised these accusations, these absurd accusations.
Right. And again, for those who want to find the video very quickly, very briefly, the name of the video is Hebrew Israelites. I'm going to give the name. Give me a second. It is Hebrew Israelites Falsehoods and False Flaggings. In fact, if I could, I'll just very briefly go to the video and just show the relevant portion so everyone can see it.
Or you could drop a link in the chat maybe for people to watch it or something like that,
Yeah, gotcha.
It's up to you. It's what I was going to say, though. Well, sorry.
Yeah.
Go
ahead. No, go ahead. Yeah.
There's a lot to say there. Well, here's one thing, real quickly, before we ask the question about this legal action that Kelly was promising. Here's a quick question. So they've long been insinuating that somehow we harassed Bunis, and the implication is that because that was their response to the fact that Bunis clarified that he never said the things that Brown claimed he said, right? Because remember that Brown and Kelly and them, they were claiming that Bunis confirmed an entire sentence
Right.
And then, Bunis, when we wrote to Bunis and other people wrote to Bunis, he clarified he never did any of that. Right. Okay, good.
Right.
I'm sorry. You want to comment on this before we?
Yeah, just very quickly. Notice the date, December the 13th, right?
So it's 10 days after they dropped this accusation, because it was on December 3rd that they started bringing out all this stuff about, they harassed the professor to make him change course and all that kind of stuff. Good.
Right. No, and the thing was that video from the 16th, they had no idea, just so everyone knows, because they may see the date of December the 16th for the relevant video, the previous clip, and they may see December the 13th and think, this was 3 days before, so maybe you harassed them in between that time. Actually, they had already made the allegations prior to that relevant live stream, right? That live stream was them merely reiterating the claim of Bunis being bullied, right?
And they hadn't seen this email. This was part of by that point. We brought this out later.
Right. So there was actually a live stream that was done before by We Woke Now, where he initially brought out the allegation. And this was after we had dropped our videos showing your correspondence, your initial correspondence with David Bunis. In fact, if anyone wants to know the ins and outs about the David Bunis situation, they can check out the video, Hebrew Israelite Falsehoods and False Flaggings, on my channel, on the Faithful to God YouTube channel. But more salient is the whole thing of litigation and international crimes.
But there's one other thing I wanted to point.
What? He seems to have dropped out. All right, we're going to wait for him to come back in. But more salient is the issue of litigation, where Kelly Richardson was seemingly hurling allegations of basically that we had committed some sort of crime when no such thing had occurred. One, no one ever bullied David Bunis. That's a complete lie from We Woke Now and the gentleman William Brown. That's their invention. And so there we go. All right, here we go.
Sorry about that. I think my phone kicked me out there for a second. My apologies.
All right.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, loud and clear. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. So what I was going to say, and I may have missed something in the minute that I was out, but what I was going to say is, before we get into the legal actions, keep in mind that the history of this accusation that we're harassing professors, that was in response to us reaching out to Bunis and getting him to clarify what he actually said. And it turns out that he never told Brown the things that Brown claimed he told him, like confirming an entire sentence. So what they did is they concocted this ridiculous story about how we, harassed and intimidated Bunis into changing course, to changing his position. But here's the thing. So that implies that before we allegedly harassed him, he did confirm a sentence, and then he denied it after we allegedly harassed him. But here's the thing. Why don't they show the emails in which he confirms the sentence? If they're claiming we forced him into changing course rather than just getting him to clarify, why don't they show the sentence? Why don't they show an email in which he gives that confmation? Because that's the ironic thing. They never showed that.
Don't you know he's a secret government agent, and the government is that interested in Georgia pews that, they're so interested in these Georgia pews that they're flagging your videos and everyone else's videos because, Kelly Richardson is this important figure who seemingly will not furnish this Hebrew sentence, even though he claims he has it, and even though everyone claims that the Bunis saw it, even though Bunis said no such thing, and they can see it in that video. But apparently, we're under litigation by the government agent Kelly Richardson.
I'll hit you with something heavy. I just got kicked out of the stream a minute ago. Can you prove that it wasn't the government that kicked me out?
Oh man, what if it was Kelly Richardson? Through some sort of remote access. The guy. Okay, we're joking. We're being facetious.
Joking, of course.
We're being facetious here.
But that brings us to this point. About Kelly's powers of his legal powers. So he claimed that was 6 months ago. 6 months ago that he promised he was going to bring not only federal but international charges against a bunch of Christian apologists. In Arizona, in Chicago, without saying any names. And so the question becomes. How's that? How are those cases coming along? Because I haven't heard anything. You haven't heard anything. That's the salient question. It's been 6 months. I would love to ask Kelly, how are those legal cases coming along? How are the federal cases and how are the international law cases coming along? And we might have to ask again in 6 months. And my guess is he's either going to be silent or tell us that he's not going to cast his legal pearls before swine either.
Well, what's interesting, right? What's a bit interesting about all of this? It's Kelly Richardson's insinuations of well, we can get into that in a little bit. I think we'll get into that in a little bit. Maybe skipping ahead. I had to stop myself. I think you know what I'm alluding to.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff to get into. If we can, it's because I think we. Oh, one other thing before we leave this subject. Also notice that when he was So that was 4 days before we dropped our videos on cats, exposing the cats fraud, right?
Mhm.
And it's funny that 4 days before that, he was talking about, you don't know how the internet works. We can trace IP addresses, even if you can't, you have dummy accounts and all this. He's raising those accusations against us. And meanwhile, it's about to drop that someone on his side was created a false correspondence, a fabricated correspondence with a Hebrew professor in Tel Aviv, and it was all just done by a dummy account, which, funny enough, at least had the same SPF IP and the same device and all that kind of stuff. So the irony is off the charts for me, and so that needed to be discussed as well. That 4 days, before the cats thing dropped, he's trying to lecture us about IP addresses and dummy accounts and, tracing dummy accounts back to certain people.
By the way, I don't know if you're looking at the comments. I thought this
What
one
did
was
I
funny.
miss? What did I miss? I see now. I see.
Anyway, so
So it was
all right,
Lily
listen,
Pond.
we're
I
having
see
a
that.
little
That's pretty
fun.
funny.
Let's
Yes.
have a little fun. We're allowed to have a little bit of fun.
It's the 4th of July. But anyway, so if we could switch gears, though, I was wondering if we could get into that thing about the comment on Kelly's video where a woman who is not an Issachar partisan asked Kelly to pray, encouraged Kelly, or not even him, just in general, just the people who are mad, encouraged them to pray for Issachar. Yes, here it is. If you could read, read this. I want to reiterate before you read the comment. This woman is not on Issachar's side. She herself made clear later that she's somewhat critical of Issachar apparently, and she's more on Kelly's side. But being a believer in the New Testament, she also
And I
suggested.
imagine that she also believes in Kelly Richardson's identity doctrine claims and
Yeah,
that
yeah,
kind
I'm
of thing.
sure.
Right.
And so
So
all she was doing, she's apparently a believer in the New Testament, and she is a believer in the New Testament, and she, without even saying, "Oh, don't respond," she's not saying don't respond to Issachar, don't address his arguments. But she did say, though, is she encouraged people or suggested that maybe people should try, those who are angry at Issachar, try praying for him. But go ahead, if you could read her comment and Kelly's amazing reply.
Her comment begins with, "Finally, with all of this siding, quote unquote, with one or the other, no one has mentioned praying for Issachar." And Kelly responds, "Respectfully," and I mean respectfully. Yeah, the irony there. "What's sad is your response is what's called quote unquote contradictory behavior. Did the Messiah stop and pray for the rich young ruler who publicly embarrassed him?" Wait a minute. Oh man, I don't. Okay,
I know there's going to be a lot to say on this. Go ahead.
yeah. "Did he stop and pray for the Pharisees and the Sadducees who publicly?" Wait, let me read it how he reads it. "For the Pharisees and Sadducees who publicly tried to embarrass him. Did you ask the same quest to
Issach.
Isaac?" All right, let me stop. "After he did his initial 2 videos, your response is what's taught in the church. It's what the plantation owners taught our ancestors as they were kidnapping, molesting, and murdering our ancestors. This system taught us to demonize the victim and have compassion for the for the perpetrators. Put pressure on the rape victim to forgive the well, you see the word there. That's what is called quote unquote cognitive dissidence and quote unquote Stockholm syndrome. Your comments is a reflection of this behavior. I say emphatically, no. What you're doing is called contradictory behavior. Quote unquote contradictory behavior that stems from the plantation. My concern is not for Issachar. It's for the people that choose to follow and support his foolishness. I can care less about taking sides or pandering to people." Yeah, right. "There's only one side I care about, and that's the side of righteousness, except when it has to do with my cousin William Brown." And I'm inserting that there because he should have said that. But question: why did the Messiah tell his disciples to arm themselves when threatened? Why didn't he simply tell them to pray when someone threatened to rob them? Well, didn't he say, "Pray for your enemies and those who despitefully use you and persecute you"?
Exactly. Isn't that funny that he missed that? He's doing all. Did the Messiah pray for the Pharisees? Well, first off, Christ did pray for, the thief, the people who mocked him and stuff like that. But whatever the case, the people on the ground who mocked him while he was on the cross. But even aside from that fact, even if you don't have a recording of Jesus doing something, that doesn't abrogate the explicit commands that Christ has given us, like pray for your enemies. Now, as a disclaimer, I'm not saying that Issachar should be considered Kelly's enemy. Disagreeing with somebody on a linguistic point online should not make someone your enemy. You can have great respect for a person who disagrees with you on that point. So I'm not saying Issachar's his enemy, but nonetheless, if Christ tells us to pray for enemies, then we should also be praying for, that shouldn't exclude praying for people who disagree with us on minor issues.
So let's look at this one more time. I want everyone to focus in on. I'm not going to say it. I'm going to, let me see if I can zoom in. So I'm going to zoom in on a relevant part. Can you see this?
Yes, I can. So he mentions the R word, and I put it in the chat.
Right there. This part right here. Look right here.
Insane. He's basically comparing his ordeal with Issachar. What he's had to endure with Issachar playing videos about the pews. He likens that. He's essentially indirectly likening that to basically an assault, a sodomite assault,
sexual assault, right?
Yeah, male on male sexual assault. He's likening it to that, which is just totally over the top. But what's sad? Even this is familiar. Even this is familiar. Because he has this sort of he's done this a lot. I'm sorry, but he has this sort of quasi-Freudian tendency to over-sexualize or sexualize discussion that doesn't have anything to do with sex. It's
exactly.
Bizarre. It's bizarre.
And that was what I was alluding to earlier, that he seems to have this this weird fetish with more specifically sexual assault, right? Like sexual language that describes sexual assault. More specifically, let me be more exact.
I see you have his community post that he put up in March. For those who don't know, this is a community post he put up in March. And the funny thing is, I would say that this one was so insane that even he realized it was insane and he took it down. But he took it down. So it was even too bad for him, I think. I think it's crazy, right? I'm guessing someone told him in private, like, bro, this is wild. But go ahead, read this. Yes. So this is in response to his critics and all that.
The supposed counter to the awakening of, all right, let me read it normally. Mm-hmm. The supposed counter to the awakening of our community is quote unquote woke supremacy. This is the underlying spirit of those who are making an assertive effort to keep you asleep. They don't care about who they use or hurt, because it's all about the quote unquote woke supremacy. They enjoy embracing the illusion of superiority. One of the red flags are phrases like, quote unquote, let this be a lesson to you. I'm sorry. It's just so ridiculous, man.
Oh, but it gets worse. At the end is where the real punchline comes.
This phrase and others like it were given as a warning to others so-called uncivilized, and you see the word there. During slavery, many of the slave owners use this phrase as many slave owners use this phrase as they would publicly
as they would publicly
as they would publicly, and that word there, the men, which is called buck breaking, quote unquote. In the words of the late Bishop Jerry Carr, fruit
booty. That's what he calls us. He calls us fruit booties. Yeah. Wait, so it's clear who's referring
behavior. To. No, in the words of the late Bishop Jerry Carr, fruit booty behavior. Like, come on, man. Like, many of them resort to extreme behavior due to, he should have spelled it D-U-E, but he put it D-O. Due to.
Wait, do you have a doctorate? You don't have a doctorate, so maybe you should be questioning his English, all right? Why don't you rein that in a bit?
I'm trying to get through this without, due to, quote unquote, I can't read that. Yo, I'm going to crack up, man. Hold on. Due to, quote unquote,
sexual impotence. So he's saying that his critics, who basically disagreed with him on Lasha Wankwadash and the pews, they're sexually impotent, they're fruit booties, they're trying to engage in cyber buck breaking and all this. But go ahead, continue. This is where it really gets bad.
Yo, this dude, man. Oh my goodness, man. Yeah, man. Real quick, I'm just showing some of the comments from the audience. That's right. Nevertheless, this group will do any and everything to push their agenda. Yeah, coming from the guy who pushes an agenda of disinformation, right? Talking about Kelly Richardson, by the way, in case he doesn't know who I'm talking about. What's interesting is most of them say they are Christians. They've shifted quote unquote buck breaking from a public display of physically
We'll say assaulting.
doing that to men, to using social media to carry out their perversions while describing us with perverse language. Isn't that interesting? Fascinating. This guy, he's like the king of he projects everything that he is onto others. Have you noticed that?
It's
Like, not saying that he actually does those things that he's saying, but I don't insult anybody while insulting everybody, right? Or they insult me while he disparages them, or they misrepresent me and make up scholars while he misrepresents people and makes up scholars, right?
Mm-hmm. But the reason we showed that community post, and we saved it because it was so insane. But you see again a pattern here.
Here's another one. Yeah.
Issachar.
Look,
we have a few things to show, but that's the most insane. But the pattern here is Issachar recently, disagreed with him about the pews, and we'll get into this one in a second. But the pattern here is Issachar disagrees with him on the pews, and when Kelly is asked, Kelly's angry at Issachar. When one of his own supporters encourages him to pray for Issachar, which is an encouragement right out of the New Testament, he likens it to the rapist. Excuse me, to the victim of sexual assault. Forgiving the person who assaulted them. That's insane. But you see, it's part of a pattern because he did the same thing with us. He's calling us fruit booties, and he's saying that we're, that what we engaged in with the pews and, and exposing the scholars that the appeals to scholarship that they engaged in, that somehow this is buck breaking. That's insane. It's insane and it's disgusting, but it's a pattern with him. But yeah, here's another example. This is an example of him in this, as I said before, like this
just the outlandishness of him, right?
Yeah, the quasi-Freudian. It's almost Freudian. It's reminiscent of Freud. Like Freud would say things like, if you like to smoke cigars too much, you have an oral fetish, or an oral fixation or something like that.
Wow.
So it's like that, and Kelly is putting a sexual spin on things that shouldn't have anything to do with sexuality. But good. Here's another example. This is a recent.
If I could read this,
yeah.
Phallic worship, the spirit of interpolation. Question. You always notice he puts question in all caps in it, and then he asks something that is really outlandish. Is there a difference between the ancient Paleo-Hebrew letters versus the Syriac block letters? The Syriac block letter Aleph was originally a serpent wound round a pole. It became the formal Aleph Al, the god post pillar or phallus, or the F or the Oph, the serpent god, the phallus. Like,
yeah, it's insane. That's him insinuating. I mean, this is just how crazy it gets. He's basically insinuating that if you use the standard Hebrew script, the Ashuri script, and he calls it Syriac, it's not Syriac, but he's implying that if you use that script rather than the Phoenician script, the Paleo-Hebrew script, as he might call it, that you might be engaging in phallic worship every time you write the Aleph, and it's like, why does his mind go there, But I can't. Go ahead. You were going to say your thoughts.
Fruit booty. Is he talking about a peach?
Oh my goodness.
Shout out to the brother George over there at Faith and Grace Ministries.
Mm-hmm.
Shout out to everyone in the chat, by the way. Oh man, my goodness, man. It is. I mean, what do you say to this? Like, this is as pseudo gets. I mean, look, coming from one of the kings of pseudo, but man, I mean, even for him, like, this is just. I mean, talk about stooping to a new low, basically. Not even the Hebrew alphabet is safe with this guy. My goodness, man.
And wait, we have another example. Now that I think about it, we have another example, right? That third clip. This is this was his response to us catching him posting that fake article. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Yeah. So if I could set this up while you're getting it, some of you may remember, some in the audience, some of the viewers, whether they watch live or not, may remember that he had posted a fake article, a fake news clip, which was supposedly from an Israeli newspaper that had them saying the DNA evidence shows that, who the true Israelites are, or something to that effect. And it was completely fake. And we caught him on that, and we put up a quick raw video showing that it was fake. And so his response to that was to claim that the fact that we caught him so quickly aside from, he also accused us of being part of a conspiracy to deceive him, but he also said the fact that we caught him so quickly shows an obsession with him and shows that we are, quote unquote, fruit booties. So go ahead, play this.
They are displaying a high level of obsession of me. That's creepy. That's alarming. That's sick. In the words of my late uncle, Bishop Jerry Carr Jr., this is fruit booty behavior. He would call this entire group a bunch of fruit booties. I am being stalked by this group to the point that Abdelmasi Amahatani uploaded a video less than an hour after I made a post to my YouTube channel.
Now I'm going to go to that page's community tab. And when I do so, he has a post which is about roughly an hour old. Yeah, and he had it echo like it was some sort of a mic drop, like boom, we got him. Look at that. He caught me posting a fake article an hour after I posted it, less than an hour after I posted it. That's the proof they're obsessed. They're a bunch of fruit booties.
Can I say, isn't it fruit booty behavior to use like sexualized language like that to kind of disparage your opponent?
Yeah, I don't want to like do counter accusations, but at the very least, it's absurd. Yeah. I'll say this.
I just thought about that.
Yeah.
I was like, wait a minute. No, listen. We're not accusing him of being a fruit booty. It's just a rhetorical question. Well, it's just out there, putting it out there. It's something to ponder. Like the person who's accusing others of that sort of behavior. Isn't it a bit ironic that they're using the sort of language that others might consider to be fruit booty behavior? And we're not saying he's a fruit booty, by the way. We're just saying there may be others out there who could potentially look at that and say the same thing about him, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, this is what I'll say. Here's the irony. So what we see here is that he's calling people fruit booties. He's speculating about the sexual orientations of his critics. He's comparing his critics to people who engage in male-on-male sexual assault. He even said that people using the standard Hebrew script might be unwittingly engaging in phallic worship. He's doing all this. And then, note the irony. Do you have that community post that he put up?
Yes.
This from back in June 24th. Think about
Indeed.
all that. All these accusations he's sending at people. Do you?
Oh, and by the way, no one is accusing him of being a fruit booty. I just want to be on record.
Yeah, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. Yeah.
So because the irony is in his post, he essentially accuses his opponents of
yeah. Well, check this out. So this is a community post from June 24th, and think about the insanity of that he's engaged in before writing this. He's calling people fruit booties. He's speculating about their sexual orientations. He's comparing them to people engaged in male-on-male sexual assault. They're doing phallic worship when they write the Aleph. All this, and then he has the audacity to write this. And let me say, this is in response to Issachar calling his response emotional. Issachar's had alluded to the fact that his response seemed needlessly emotional. So this is his complaint about that. If you could read that.
Yes, indeed. So it reads, "Spirit of witchcraft. As I release and do a special playbook this week, I'm going to touch on the misused label emotional, quote unquote. So many misuse this word in an attempt to make the association exclusively to women and ultimately deceptively use it to label men. They use this word interchangeable with quote unquote effeminate as an attempt to destroy the character of another man. This is the playbook some within our community have used as they attempted to destroy my character, and others have made it a point to stand for truth and be a true watchman, while I then go on and call people fruit booties, but that's okay. We're not going to really pay attention to that much."
Isn't that ironic? So this is a guy who spent months calling people fruit booties, and accusing them of sexual assault and all this, and all that disgusting stuff that he's done. But then now that someone said that his responses are needlessly emotional, he's like, that's character assassination. That's witchcraft. It's like, have you forgotten
while
your
I
own
call
behavior?
people fruit booty and try to assassinate their character, right?
Yeah. It shows that he's either incredibly not self-aware, or he's just he just has these glaring double standards. And it would be even worse if he's conscious of them, that he's going to say calling someone emotional is outrageous, but calling them fruit booties and rapists and all that's perfectly fair game.
Yeah. Those who sexually assault men, right? Well, here's the thing. I want to say this for the record. None of us are fruit booties, but we do find it a bit ironic that the gentleman who is calling people fruit booties is using this overly sexualized language. Not again, we're not accusing him of being anything that he accuses us. We're simply saying it's ironic.
Well, if the
It's
shoe
like,
was on the other foot, he would seize upon it. That's for sure.
yes, it's fascinating stuff, man.
Like if
But,
we were looking at olives and seeing phalluses and stuff like that, I imagine he would seize upon that. Because if he thinks, us catching him posting a fake article within an hour of him posting it is indicative of that sort of orientation, then man. But yeah. Anyway,
frightening stuff, man. Frightening stuff, man.
But speaking of Freudian, since we're talking about Freudian stuff, here's people talk about a Freudian slip, and that's not necessarily something sexual. There's non-sexual Freudian slips, right? Like where you can slip up and say something, and that maybe you had in the back of your mind, and you let it slip. Now that's never to be taken too seriously, but it is humorous when it happens, when someone seems to accidentally reveal something in a slip of the tongue. Do you have that tweet? It was
yes, I'm pulling it up right now.
There's a tweet that I posted, but you were the one who brought this to my attention. This is just for fun. We're segueing away from all the sexual stuff. This is just sort of I think we're starting to wind down now. But go ahead.
Yes, if you just give me a moment. No
problem.
Just, if you can before I play this, yeah.
So this is a tweet that I had posted a while back, but it just seemed fun to share it just because we're on the topic of quasi-Freudian things. So this might be considered a Freudian slip of some sort. We'll say that. I posted this tweet back in February, but it's actually from a video. It's showing a clip of a video.
Or maybe an admission of guilt. I mean, depending on how you look at this, right?
Yeah. Maybe. We'll just leave it in the up in the air. Maybe. It's just a very funny and ironic slip of the tongue, and maybe a Freudian slip, parapraxis, as they say. So it's going to show a very brief clip, like, I don't know, less than 10 seconds of something he said back in December, I think right around Christmas time. Yeah, listen to this. He's talking about Richard Katz, and listen to the way he refers to Richard Katz.
Like Professor David Bunis, Professor William Katz sent a blind copy of the email to Pastor William Brown. Now, Professor William Katz sent
Can we play that one more time, just for the fun of it?
Professor David Bunis, Professor William Katz sent a blind copy of the email to Pastor William Brown. Now, Professor William Katz.
Okay, I'm sorry. I know my behavior here is somewhat infantile, but that is very fun to me because I wonder at that point if he knew that. I assume he did at that point. He knew that William Brown wrote the Katz emails, and so it's interesting that he slips up and calls Richard Katz William Katz. Your
right.
thoughts?
Yeah, my thoughts are again, little wink there. Maybe we're getting a little, wink to some sort of admission. Maybe kind of subconsciously putting it out there.
Yeah, yeah. And what's funny about this, in his videos on Issachar, while he refuses to discuss the pews, he does these things where he talks about like, well, look how Issachar looks off to the left. Did you catch that? Issachar looked to the right. His eyes got wider. Like he's trying to do all this like analysis of his facial features to show that he's actually lying. And so it's funny if you engage in that insanity. Imagine if like one of us or if Issachar had a slip up like that, he would probably seize upon it. So
right.
At the very least, we can say it's a potential Freudian slip. Can't say for certain that
potential.
It is, but, man, it's interesting, and it's fun. Indeed. At the very least, it's fun.
Indeed. Well, I find that utterly fascinating, man. We'll leave that to the audience. We'll leave that up into to interpretation. But yeah, I think that says it all, right?
Yeah, I think we've pretty much summed it up. It'd probably be best to wish everybody a happy 4th of July and get ready to go to church.
Yeah,
but this is a fun
Same
show,
here.
a fun early morning show.
Absolutely. So with that being said, I want to thank Abu for coming on through, for sharing his insight into a lot of this stuff. And for those who are following along, I hope that this is insightful for you. If you would like, you could check out the playlist on this YouTube channel, on the Faithful to God YouTube channel, entitled Georgia Pews. In fact, I'll give you the exact name so you know what to look for. Should be the one on the Georgia Pews entitled Georgia Pew Arguments Debunked, if I'm not mistaken. And it will give you an outline of the history of this argument going all the way back to 2019. Was it October 2019?
Yeah, that's where it began. It began very respectfully, and he it's funny because he says that he's given this analogy before. He said it like if you're
Yeah.
a brawler and you can't deal with a seasoned prize fighter, you got to turn it into an ugly fight to give yourself
Yeah.
a chance. That's funny. He tries to project that onto others. That pretty much
Right.
describes his behavior. We came out very respectful in October of 2019, and right away he came out with the accusations of
Right.
he was going to sue us and witchcraft and
Right. So the playlist is called Hebrew Israelite Georgia Pew's Arguments Debunked. So it has 20 videos. It should have a cover photo with the infamous Richard Katz cat, the Richard Katz deception in font, in blue font. So you can't miss it. And it will give you the history of everything that is taking place from the beginning all the way up until our present time. So definitely check that out if you want to find out more about the ins and outs of this back and forth with We Woke Now, William Brown, and others. But I want to thank you, Abu, for coming on through. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much. Happy 4th of July to you. Happy 4th of July to everybody. Happy Lord's Day. More importantly, I'm sorry I didn't say that first. Happy Lord's Day. And to anyone who's going to church today, I hope you have a spiritually fulfilling worship service. And God bless all.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much. And with that being said, I'm going to end it here. God bless you all. I hope this has edified someone out there. And until next time, take care. God bless.